In the blistering heat of early October, the plains near Gaza shimmered under the relentless sun, as if the earth itself had been set aflame. Dust rose in swirling clouds, clinging to armor and skin, stinging eyes and lungs alike. Every step of the crusader horses sent tremors through the dry soil, a harbinger of the storm that was about to break. From the west, the banners of the crusader army fluttered stiffly in the wind. Red crosses embroidered on white mantles, symbols of faith and defiance, of vows made to God and king alike. The knights, proud and disciplined, rode with purpose, their armor gleaming, their swords sharpened to deadly perfection. They believed themselves invincible, bearers of divine will. But beyond the horizon, unseen in the shimmering heat, the forces of the Mamluks and their allied Khwarezmian warriors watched with patient, lethal precision. Earlier that year, Jerusalem, the jewel of Christendom in the Levant, had fallen. The Khwarezmians, mercenaries, and exiles driven by vengeance, had sacked the city with ruthless efficiency, leaving ruins where temples and churches once stood. The kingdom of Jerusalem, once mighty and untouchable, now clung desperately to fragments of its former territory. In the face of overwhelming enemy numbers, the remnants of the crusader states gathered near Forbie, hoping to stem the tide of conquest and defend what little remained. Among the assembled forces rode the Templars, their white mantles embroidered with the Crimson Cross. These were men who had sworn life and death to their faith, who had spent decades carving a reputation on the battlefield. They were joined by the Hospitallers, the Teutonic Knights, and a motley array of local levies, farmers, townsmen, and younger knights, all drawn into the shadow of war. Together, they formed a coalition bound by necessity, by desperation, and by the fragile hope that courage and steel could withstand overwhelming odds. The Mamluks, in contrast, were a force forged in discipline and lethal precision. Trained from youth to master horseback combat, archery, and tactics, they were the finest cavalry in the Islamic world. Beside them rode the Khwarezmians, exiles whose hatred for the Crusaders burned as fiercely as the desert sun, men for whom mercy was an alien concept. They had been waiting, circling the Crusader army like predators, calculating the perfect moment to strike. The morning was thick with tension. Scouts returned with fragmented reports, movements of enemy units, distant banners, the unmistakable shadow of cavalry. Commanders huddled to discuss strategy, their voices taut with urgency. The Templars adjusted their formations, checking armor and weapons, whispering prayers for protection. Young knights, some who had never faced true combat, felt fear gnaw at their resolve, while veterans, hardened by decades of battles in the Holy Land, tried to mask their apprehension with stern faces. By dawn, the march toward Forbie began. The Templars rode at the front, a wall of steel, and red crosses, their lances pointed forward, eyes scanning the horizon. Behind them followed the Hospitallers, the Teutonic Knights, and the allied infantry, a diverse army bound together by desperation. Horses hooves pounded against the parched earth, raising clouds of dust that choked lungs and eyes alike. Every man knew that the coming battle would test not only skill and courage but the limits of endurance and faith. For hours, the army advanced, the silence between movements filled with the sound of creaking armor, the clatter of swords in their scabbards, and the low murmurs of prayers. And then the first assault came, sudden, relentless. From the east, arrows rained down like a black storm. The sky darkened as shafts pierced the air, striking horses and men alike. Screams erupted. Chaos spread, and the previously disciplined ranks began to stagger under the onslaught. The Templars, however, held their ground. Shield met shield, sword met sword, forming an unyielding wall of steel and faith. They pressed forward against impossible odds, cutting down enemies with precision honed over decades of crusading. Each knight was a bulwark of defiance, every swing of the blade a prayer in motion. Yet for every enemy struck down, another seemed to take its place, an unending tide of foes that pressed from all sides. The first true clash of cavalry arrived with a thunderous roar. Horses collided with horses, knights with knights, and the battlefield became a whirlwind of hooves, steel, and screaming men. Dust mixed with blood, coating the plains in a crimson haze. Commanders shouted orders, attempting to maintain cohesion in the chaos, but the noise of the battle swallowed their words. Knights pushed forward, then fell back, their formations disrupted by the relentless charge of the Mamluks and Khwarezmians. As the sun climbed higher, the encirclement began. Mamluk cavalry, swift and unyielding, struck from multiple directions, cutting off any hope of retreat. Panic began to ripple through the Crusader lines. Soldiers who had marched confidently into battle now found themselves trapped in a deadly snare. The Templars, refusing to yield, formed a defensive circle, swords raised, faces set in grim determination. Around them, the battlefield was transformed into a maelstrom of death. Horses trampled the fallen, arrows found flesh despite shields, and cries of pain and terror echoed across the plain. Every heartbeat was a battle in itself. Every breath risked inhaling the dust and blood that now filled the air. The Templars' training, discipline, and courage were being tested to their limits. Their red crosses shone defiantly against the backdrop of chaos, a symbol of unwavering resolve. Yet, even as they held their ground, the enemy pressed closer, relentless and unforgiving. The first day of the Battle of Forbie had begun, and already it was clear that this confrontation would demand sacrifices beyond imagination. By midday, the sun hung mercilessly over the plains, scorching the earth and those who fought upon it. Dust and heat merged into a haze that obscured the horizon, but even in this blinding glare, the figures of the crusader army were starkly visible. They were a disciplined force, yet the tension and fear were palpable. Every man knew that the coming hours could determine not only their lives but the fate of the entire Christian presence in the Levant. The battle had begun with volleys of arrows raining down from unseen Khwarezmian and Mamluk archers. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid smoke of burning equipment. Horses screamed and stumbled, riders toppled into the dust, and the cries of the wounded mixed with the commands shouted by commanders trying to maintain order. For the levies and unseasoned soldiers, the suddenness of the attack was terrifying. Many fell in panic, unable to withstand the coordinated assaults. The Templars, however, stood firm. Their discipline was unmatched, their formation a living testament to centuries of training and devotion. Shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield, they formed a defensive line that repelled repeated charges. Each knight was a bulwark against the tide of chaos, their swords cutting down foes with a precision born of years of battle experience. Around them, the Hospitallers and Teutonic knights attempted to hold the lines, but the sheer weight of enemy numbers began to tell. The enemy's strategy was devastating. The Mamluks, with their superior cavalry, struck from multiple directions, exploiting every gap and weakness. They moved like shadows, fast and unpredictable, encircling the Christian forces and leaving no avenue for retreat. Khwarezmian mercenaries, hardened by years of conquest and vengeance, cut down anyone who tried to flee. Arrows pierced armor, swords hacked through shields, and horses, frightened and injured, trampled over fallen comrades. The battlefield had become a living nightmare, a swirl of blood, dust, and steel. Hour after hour, the clash continued. Knights fell in succession, their bodies forming grim barricades of the fallen. The Templars, refusing to yield, held the center, a wedge of defiance in the midst of the carnage. Each attack they launched bought precious time, delaying the Mamluk advance and giving their allies fleeting hope. Yet for every enemy they felled, 10 more seemed to take their place. The sun climbed higher, bearing down on men already drenched in sweat and blood, sapping strength and resolve. The encirclement tightened. The Crusaders' once proud formations were shattered, and panic began to spread. Soldiers tried to retreat, only to find the Mamluk cavalry cutting them off, a relentless wall of mounted destruction. Amid the chaos, the Templars made a final stand. They formed a circle, backs to one another, swords raised against an unending wave of foes. They fought not for victory but for honor, for faith, and for the sanctity of their vows. Each swing of the sword was a prayer, each fallen comrade a call to resist even further. The battlefield was apocalyptic. Dust mixed with blood, carried on the hot wind across the plain. Horses, noble and proud, collapsed under the weight of the fight. Knights were crushed beneath their mounts or struck down by enemy blades. The cries of agony, of rage, and of despair rose above the clanging of steel, echoing across the plains of Forbie. No mercy was shown. The Mamluks and Khwarezmians fought with the single-minded precision of predators, leaving death in their wake. The Templars' courage reached its zenith during this hour of despair. Legends tell of knights who continued to fight even when surrounded, of men who held off dozens of enemies at a time, of banners raised high amidst torrents of blood and dust. They knew they were facing near certain death, yet they did not waver. Every swing, every charge, every defensive stance was a testament to faith and martial discipline. And yet, even the bravest of men could not withstand such overwhelming numbers indefinitely. By late afternoon, the unthinkable had occurred. The Crusader army was annihilated. The Mamluks had shattered their formations, routed the infantry, and crushed the cavalry. Hundreds of soldiers lay dead across the plain, including almost all of the Templar knights who had formed the heart of the army. Only a few had survived, wounded and broken, dragged from the field by chance or mercy. The banners of Christendom were torn, trampled, and soaked with blood. The red crosses of the Templars, once symbols of invincibility, now lay in the dust. The aftermath was a scene of horror. The Mamluks rode over the battlefield to ensure no survivors could regroup. Horses wandered among the dead, neighing in distress. The cries of the wounded echoed across the plains, unanswered. The once proud Templars were no longer a fighting force. The Christian coalition had been decimated, its power in the region shattered. La Forbie had become a tomb not just for men, but for hope itself in the crusader states. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the blood-soaked ground, the full scale of the disaster became clear. Jerusalem remained vulnerable. The Christian foothold in the Levant weakened beyond repair. The Mamluks had proven their dominance, and the legend of the Templars, though still honored for their bravery, had been forever altered. La Forbie would live on in history as the site where an elite army, the pride of Christendom, had been brought to its knees, a haunting reminder of the merciless reality of war. Even in this devastation, the story of the Templars endured, a tale of courage, honor, and unyielding faith in the face of annihilation. La Forbie was a battlefield of despair, but it was also a stage upon which valor had been displayed in its purest, most tragic form. The echoes of their stand would reverberate through history, a reminder that even in total defeat, heroism could shine brighter than the fiercest sun. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the plains of La Forbie were transformed into a silent graveyard. The once proud banners of the Crusaders lay torn and trampled in the dust. Horses wandered aimlessly among the fallen, neighing softly as if mourning their masters. The air was heavy with the stench of blood, sweat, and death, and the cries of the dying grew faint, leaving only the wind to whisper across the endless field of corpses. The scale of the disaster was staggering. Nearly the entire Crusader army had been annihilated. Of the Templars, once the elite shock troops of Christendom, only a handful remained. Their white mantles, soaked with blood, hung in tatters. Many of the surviving knights were grievously wounded, their strength drained, their spirits battered by the horrors they had endured. The Hospitallers and Teutonic knights fared no better. The coalition army had been shattered beyond recognition. The Mamluks, disciplined and ruthless, took full control of the battlefield. They combed the plain to ensure that no wounded enemy would survive to regroup, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. The victory was not only tactical but symbolic. The Christian foothold in the region had been dealt a blow from which it would never fully recover. In the days that followed, the political and military consequences became painfully clear. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, already weakened by the loss of the city to the Khwarezmians earlier that year, was now left almost defenseless. The Crusader states, fragmented and demoralized, struggled to maintain any semblance of order. The Mamluks, emboldened by their triumph, consolidated power across the region, securing roots and strongholds that had long been contested. The balance of power in the Levant had shifted irrevocably. Among the surviving Templars, tales of heroism began to circulate almost immediately. Stories were told of knights who had held their ground against impossible odds, their swords cutting a path through dozens of enemies before finally succumbing. Some fought to protect retreating levies, buying their comrades minutes of safety with their own lives. Others stood atop mounds of corpses, rallying the wounded and refusing to yield even as the enemy encircled them. These acts of courage would be immortalized in the chronicles of the Order, inspiring future generations despite the catastrophic loss. Yet the human cost was unbearable. Families across Europe received letters of death and despair. Entire contingents of knights, young men who had trained for years in the discipline and warfare of the Crusader orders, had vanished. The Templar Order itself was no longer the unassailable force it had once been in the Holy Land. Recruitment and rebuilding would be difficult, and the psychological impact of La Forbie lingered for decades. The Order's aura of invincibility had been shattered, though its reputation for bravery remained intact. The survivors carried their grief and scars back to their remaining strongholds, the memory of La Forbie haunting their every step. They rebuilt what they could, but the shadow of the disaster followed them. In strategic terms, the Crusader states were forced into defensive positions, ceding territory and influence to their adversaries. Jerusalem remained under threat, and the dream of reclaiming lost glory in the Holy Land grew ever more distant. La Forbie, however, was not just a story of defeat. It became a testament to the valor, loyalty, and unyielding faith of the Templars and other Crusader knights. Chroniclers would describe the battlefield as a place where honor and courage were displayed in their purest form, where men faced death with dignity and resolve. The memory of their stand, though tragic, became a symbol of what it meant to fight with faith and commitment, even in the face of annihilation. The echoes of La Forbie would reverberate through history. Scholars, chroniclers, and storytellers would recount the heroism and horror of that day, ensuring that while the Crusaders had been defeated, their courage was never forgotten. For the Templars, La Forbie was a crucible, a battlefield where the limits of human endurance, devotion, and martial skill were tested, and where legends were born from the ashes of defeat. In the end, the plains of La Forbie were more than a battlefield. They were a testament to courage, to the price of war, and to the fragility of human endeavor when confronted with the relentless force of destiny. And though the Templars had been broken as a fighting force, their legacy, forged in the heat of battle, in blood and sacrifice, would endure long after the dust had settled.